Okay, so every week we're sort of discussing various different scenarios, various different problems that our members are facing. What's the number one thing you think right now people are holding people back from the transformation that they want?
By far, it is the inability to regulate emotions effectively to keep them on track with their goals. People resorting to self-destructive habits to either mask stress or mask issues that they need to face. And in my opinion, that is what perpetually puts them in this cycle of never getting the results they want, because they're trying to fight fire with gasoline, probably a better one. It's a good one. Not fire with fire with just gasoline, but they're not addressing the root cause of what's preventing them from moving forward. And in my opinion, if everyone learned how to not resort to food for any stress or emotional reason, everyone would be in the shape of their life and we would be out of a job.
So this is something we've obviously spoken about a lot, and it's very easy to talk about. It's can come across very blasé, very like, yeah, that's a simple solution. The reality is obviously very different. For example, if you know the root cause is your relationships in turmoil, but the action is you need to break up with your partner, the realization is a lot easier than the action point. Now, how do we bridge the gap here? And how do we actually facilitate that change versus just identifying and realizing, which we know is one thing. That's why we've spoken about in the past around like life coaching or mindfulness and various different aspects of mindset where it's easy to introspect. It's a lot difficult to act on it. Bridging that gap. What's some of your thoughts on doing so?
I think the biggest thing with the relationship stuff is being able to see beyond that initial pain. And I know, Ivan, you've used that analogy you've read about, I think, before, about the thorn in your side or in your leg.
Yeah.
Or basically a lady gets a thorn stuck in her thigh and it hurts so much, but the thought of the pain that it would come with trying to pull that thorn out just seems so overwhelming to her. She just learns to live with the thorn in her leg. So she has to walk differently, sleep, separately. She becomes bent over from having to try and adapt to this. She lives in pain the whole time. Whereas if she had just dealt with the thorn itself and just accepted the short-term extreme pain, she could have then removed the thorn and then gone back to living a pain-free life. And I think that's what happened, especially with the relationship auditing. The initial pain or perceived pain that's going to come from having to cut people out of your life, or even not necessarily cut them out, but dealing with those root issues with them. Maybe you're going to counseling, maybe you're actually just having these hard conversations, can seem so overwhelming that it's hard to actually see beyond that it could be better. Whereas in reality, if you're 30, 40, 50, you've still got a lot of your life left to go. And until you do deal with that short-term pain, you're going to be in some form of, pain or restricted happiness until that does get sorted.
I think one thing we all get and we all see every single week is this external environment causing all the internal issues, and relationships is such a high commonality in this. How many times do we hear that a spouse is causing undue stress or a friend circle is causing undue stress? Without a doubt, we'll get a message every week saying something about realizing the toxicity of my spouse relationship, or realizing that the people I hang around with, I'm always in bad behaviors. But what we're not seeing as much is, I'm actually going to deal with this. Mm-hmm. I'm actually going to change the circles I'm in. I'm actually going to change the relationship. When we do see that, when we see someone, when we get a message saying, I've just filed for divorce, or I've just done something drastic in my relationships, we almost every single time will also see a massive change in their overall behavior, mindset, identity, and ultimately their body transforms as a result of it, and for life as well. Because suddenly this big thing, which was holding them back for so long, is now no longer there. And the correlation on that is, I'd say it's 100%. Every time we've seen someone say, I'm filed for divorce, or I'm changing something drastic in my social circles, everything changes. But we also see 100% commonality on those who continuously mention relationships as a source of stress. to continuously fight this binge eating cycle, emotional eating cycle, or just never really accepting what's going on?
Yeah, because it's much easier in the short term, as Ed mentioned earlier. It's much easier to keep that thorn in there, right? It's much easier
Really
to be
hard.
like, no, I don't want to. Yeah, it's like, no, these friends, I've grown up with them, and I like them, but you don't really. If they were your true friends, then they would be supporting you in your journey to actually become the best version of yourself. That's something to really think about, because if you feel that someone is holding you back from achieving your full potential, that is not a spouse, that is not a friend, that is someone who is trying to control you in some way. Because if that person truly loved you, and I know AV and Ed, you've both spoken about this, your partners make you flourish. They allow you to become the best versions of yourself. That's amazing. That's what a relationship is. Not this, I don't know, what would be the right word to describe it? Just this, I don't know, this toxic sort of competitive nature with one another. Like if one is trying to be healthy, the other one feels bad and tries to tear them down or in some way. Is that the right sort of way to go?
100%.
That's what I see a lot.
Well, and the thing is, like, with relationships, I think it's really important to actually work on them. This is not a saying like, if it's not working, or if you're not feeling communicated, you just dump them, right? That's not the message here. It's that you actually have to invest time and energy into them. Like, for example, I've spoken about the weekly check-in I do with Chandni, and that every week we work on opportunities to improve. And most weeks we'll either have nothing to improve, or there's these issues that have come up in the week, and nothing gets swept under the carpet and just left. Every week without fail, they'll come straight to the surface, and it'll become something to work on and address. And if it means having a hard conversation for 30 minutes, that's okay, because that will solve. The worst thing that can happen there is it builds and builds and builds, and then you start creating resentment, and then you start using things as crutches to deal with that, and then it leads to months and years, and next thing you know, you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. These sorts of things will end up happening. And that's how it comes from. It's just a lack of communication. And one thing I always say to people who are having relationship issues is, have you communicated it properly? Mm-hmm. And sometimes they'll say no, and sometimes they'll say yes. And if they have, what the next thing that typically follows is, yes, but she said this or he said this, and they're not understanding it. Well, that's where you've got to really put in the work. Or if you have done all the work and still not made any progress, then you need to, look at potentially going separate ways.
Yeah, that's a good point you just said, though, because I think people initially talk to a partner or a friend or family member, whoever it is, about these things, but very much on a surface level. Started this new diet. Reality is, you've probably said that to them 100 times before. Last week it was keto, the week before that it was intermittent fasting, whatever it is. So it's not unreasonable with them to probably not take it that seriously. And like the same way if someone said that to me, who if I had a friend who's on a new diet every week and then came up to me, I'm doing another diet this week, I'd probably be like, oh, okay, but I'm not going to take it that seriously. But if that person sits me down and goes, you know what, I've realized that X, Y, and Z is really important to me. This is how getting in better shape is going to help that. So whether that is, work performance, health, kids, whatever that is important to that person, if you then explain that to your partner or your family member, whoever it is, they can understand that. And then you can say, look, I'm doing this because I want to be healthier so I can live with you for longer. I want to be there to see our kid grow up for longer. I want to be the better version of myself, to be a better parent, a better partner, whatever it is. So if they're still against that, you then need to basically ask them, would you rather me not be healthier and live longer? Would you rather me not be happier, be more confident, be there for our kid, whatever it is? Because then that's a yes or no question ultimately. But I think what happens through that conversation as well is you then get your expectations of each other. Because I actually think this is where the biggest issues come, is when just the expectations aren't aligned. And that, I'm not a relationship expert, but I think that's where most of the issues then start to break down. So you can say, I'm on this new plan or this program, doing this journey. These are what I need to do. This is the time I'm going to have to dedicate to training each week, whatever. But then what do you still need from me? If you do just sack off your family just to go to the gym and get your steps in, it's fair enough. They'll probably think you're an arsehole. But if you say, look, I need to give 3 hours a week to go and train, what do you need from me though? Because if your wife wants to go and have a coffee a couple of times a week, go and do her own training, do whatever else, then you can look after the kids, or you can then do the cleaning in the house, or whatever it is, to make sure that expectations are met. As long as they're met, there can't really be issues.
Yeah, that's bang on.
Yeah,
that's bang on. One thing, with that exact discussion, we've got one of our long-term clients, Punit. In his case study, we discuss how he discusses how for the first 2 years of his journey, he was really struggling to get past a certain point. And it wasn't until he went on his honeymoon with his wife at the time, as in not at the time, as in once she became the wife, they went on their honeymoon. And during one of they were doing a long drive in, I think it was Australia. And he said, look, they had a really deep chat about his fitness journey, because this was the blocker. And he decided to just let her listen to some RNT Fitness Radio podcasts. And that, combined with just in-depth conversation, he came back from that honeymoon. The next 6 months, he got absolutely shredded, got his photo shoot, and ever since, he stayed in the shape of his life, stronger than he's ever been. And that was his thorn. And he had a really good relationship, but they hadn't discussed that one element that was causing friction in when they would socialize or when they would be at home together. Because it's these little bits that cause all the blockers and the slowing down in progress, right? But once he pulled that thorn out and had that discussion, and really had that discussion and had a two-way discussion around it, his progress just went through the roof, and he's in the best place he's ever been. And it all started with just that. For 2 years, he just couldn't get past it. And it was constantly thinking, what's going on? What's going on? All the numbers are adding up, all these sorts of things, but it's those little things. It's the comments, it's the discussions, it's, these things build, and you have to have that two-way conversation around it.
I think that's really interesting. And just going back to how you and your wife now deal with issues right from on the surface, and as soon as they pop up, you just deal with it. And I'm sure you'd agree that has also carried over into what you do with RNT. If any issues pop up, and that's bled into us, and that's bled into the entire team. And what we do with how we handle what we do at work, we now handle the same things in our life, right? Yeah. But if an issue pops up outside of work or in life, I'm dealing with that thing straight away, because I don't want it festering. I don't want it boiling up. I don't want it to be at the back of my mind when I'm trying to do things, because we know it slows you down. If a hard conversation has to be had, if something needs to be done, something needs to be met, we just do it. And that is a lot more automatic now. But I remember at a time that wasn't the case for myself, and because I wasn't around other high performers, or I wasn't around people wanting to push the envelope, and it's really interesting, because if you start tucking things under the rug with your partner, with your work colleagues, with whoever, that is how you will handle your problems in all areas of life. You know what I mean? That quote, how you do one thing is how you do everything. Yeah. I think it perfectly aligns with this behavior, and if you learn to, as soon as something pops up with your partner, you learn to just deal with that immediately and resolve it, you're going to do that in your career. And then you're also going to do that with your fitness stuff. You're going to do that with your health and you're going to do that with your physique transformation. When an issue arises about why am I continuing to overeat? Why am I continuing to not train? Okay, I need to deal with this. Not just watch a motivational video, not even just listen to one of our motivational podcasts, which are fantastic, by the way. But again, you can listen to all our podcasts day in, day out. You can read all the books, read all the topics. If you do not take action, it is meaningless. And we'll be the first to tell you that, because we don't want you guys to just be like, oh yeah, we love your content. Oh, cool. Have you done anything? Nah, I'll do it next week.
Yeah. And having that hard conversation is not there. Yeah, it's not easy as well. Like even now, if for example we get to that weekly discussion, and there's something I need to bring up, the heart starts going a bit faster, because it's not an easy thing to say. Like this needs to be worked on. I'm feeling like this. I think I need this from you to make you feel better, or that, whatever it is. Like that's not an easy thing to bring up. So that it's not like we're just saying, oh, you're just ripping people, or like we're just bringing things up for the sake of it. Having that conversation is difficult. But that's where it is. And the reason why we want to focus on this podcast is because we're seeing so many people getting held back by their relationships, and it could be spouse, it could be friends, it could be colleagues. There's so much of it that it's tying people down without sometimes they're even realizing it.
Yeah.
And I think when you do dive deeper into those expectations from each other, you learn a lot more about what the relationship's based on. And if the relationship is being based on foundations that no longer apply to your new identity, then they're going to be shaky foundation. So let's say you have a chat with your partner and their expectation is that you guys go out for drinks 3 times a week, or you get a takeaway in 3 times a week. If you just lost a load of weight, you went from 90 kilos, you're down like 60 kilos, you're lean, you're fitter, you're healthier, eating takeaway 3 nights a week probably isn't going to be in line with that new identity you've got. So if that's something that the other person sees as non-negotiable, then there's going to be like a butting of heads, and something's going to have to give there. And that's either going to be that relationship, or it's going to be your health and fitness. And that's where you can ultimately see, although you might get on and you might be able to bring kids up together or whatever it is, if the relationship is based on actually being eating partners or whatever, rather than a true supporting relationship, that's when it's going to get exposed. And I can understand that's a scary thing to think of, like ripping off the covers and seeing what's underneath. But until that happens, those shaky foundations are going to keep shaking.
The thing is, they always get shakier once you are on this journey, because suddenly now you're changing your behaviors, and it's very, you can find yourself coasting in a relationship when you're living that normal life that was in your normal before. When you're suddenly introducing new habits and behaviors, this is when you can really put things to the test, and you can see like, well, is this actually going to work? Is this actually stable? Or was this built on some dream that you guys had 5 years ago? Because remember, a lot of people grow apart, like especially in friendships. So you have long-term friendships, like you mentioned earlier around, oh, I've known these guys for so long, or these are high school friends, and that's all great. But there's no point in having friends just because you've known them for a long time. You have to have grown with them together. And it's very normal for relationships to grow apart. It happens in business, it happens in your career, in your colleagues, your spouse. If you don't invest in it, you will diverge. That's very normal. And this is very common to see. If you look at anyone listening, think about all your high school friends and think about how many of them you're still really close with. Luckily, I am actually close with a lot of my high school friends. But if I look at the exact group back then and I look at the group here, there's still people who have fallen off because we've just gone different paths, and we've just either outgrown each other or whatever it may, our values have been misaligned or whatever it is. But as life goes through its different seasons, you will be put through the different tests, and if you don't work on it and think it's worth the investment, you'll just naturally fall apart. But if you're trying to cling on to it, that's when all the issues arise.
Yeah, and it will often highlight actually that the other person or people in the relationship, it will highlight their potential weaknesses or flaws and things that they need to work on. And it's not saying that they have to, like just because you're undergoing a transformation, it doesn't mean they have to. But if it highlights theirs, they will often, if they either one, address it and deal with it as well, which is the ultimate, the thing we want. But otherwise, they may potentially try and pull you down to stop them having to address it. Because when you start dealing with these issues, it then becomes a lot more evident that they've got them. If you're now no longer having the evening binges with them, they're suddenly sitting binging on their own. That feels a lot less comfortable than when you were both doing it together. That will often result in, if they don't deal with it themselves, anger normally projected towards you. Now, the real anger is with themselves because they've got these issues, but they're going to try and pull you back so then they don't have those feelings. And that's where ideally they're going to start transforming. But if they are getting angry with you and you do talk to them about the expectations, why you're doing it, it will often come back to it's their issue, and it's not that you're being selfish or wrong. You're just exposing the issues they've had all along.
The other dynamic that I've seen, not as common, but it can be very toxic, is when someone is actually being healthy and fit and they actually try and put the other one down. And the other one secretly wants to get better and wants to also be healthy and fit. But the one who's now healthy and fit has developed an ego around being healthy and fit, and then starts, whether actively or not, starts putting the other one down, saying, oh no, you eat your biscuits, or I'm going to prep my food, you prep your own food separately. And there's this whole dynamic that develops, which isn't as common, but probably because people don't actually see it. But I've heard about it a few times of late, and that's a really toxic one, because sometimes neither of them are aware it's even happening. And the one who actually is aware is the one who's trying to make a change, but he or she can't make the change, or is finding it difficult to make the change because the other person who's been on this journey is now suppressing the other one without the other person realizing. That's a really difficult one. And again, it comes back to communication and expectations.
Yeah, that is a very interesting one. I've not come across that too many times, but I know it happens. Definitely know it happens. And that creates like that again is using the physical as a horrible vehicle.
Yeah,
and it's not something that we recommend. You know, that is not spreading generational health. That's not trying to help your partner. That's trying to belittle them to make you yourself feel more superior to them. And that is a horrible way to go about things. So for those who are getting in shape or those who are in shape, don't act all superior just because you are in shape. Doesn't mean yes, it's fantastic, but remember the physical should be the vehicle for you to be incredible in all areas of your life, not just be healthy and fit and then make other people feel bad for not being healthy and fit.
I think it just comes back to like a reminder of your ego when you do go on this journey, because it can be very easy to go on an ego trip when you do get in shape. Suddenly you're getting attention, suddenly you're getting extra dopamine in your life. You got extra words of affirmation, extra gratification, all these things are coming at you. You can start thinking you're the dog's bollocks. And it's very important you don't let that get to your head, and just realize that you've just done something for yourself, which should make everyone around you feel better and should allow you to spread positive impact, not let your head get so big that you start putting other people down or start saying how amazing your life is because you're healthy and fit. That's not the goal. And that's something to remember, because that can impact your relationships around you and may also create that sense of extra self-worth or identity where you develop the wrong association with health and fitness, because it allows you to keep this masqueraded identity you've built. It comes back to the physical being the wrong vehicle. That's not what we want to have.
Yeah, it's a very tricky one to pick up.
Yeah, people who are doing it don't realize it, but when I think we can see it from a mile off, because I think everyone at some point has had that, right? We've all had it at some point where you start thinking you're superior because you're doing this. Once you ride that wave, you can start seeing other people and you're like, oh, come on, like you need to get off this horse.
I think it's a case of you've got this new identity, and although you want to shed the skin of it from a behavioral point from your old one, you need to remember that you were like that before. You had that identity, you had those flaws. Not that you're flawless now, but you know, you look back, oh, how do people eat like that? How do they not do that? Well, that was you a couple of months ago. So you do know like that you were doing that. You know, I could say, oh, how do people binge now? Or like rewind 5 years ago, I was having times when I was binging on food. Like, it's not part of my behavior now, but I can draw back on that and I can use it to empathize with people and think what, you know, potentially how they're finding things. So yeah, it's like what you said, it's not using the physical as a vehicle, it's just using it to pump up your own ego. But I do think that only takes you to a certain level, because you either suddenly get to a point where you realize there's actually so many people who are beyond you, either on a physical level or educational level, whatever it is. And so unless you just remain the big fish in the small pond, as soon as you go into that big pond, you realize you're actually just like a tiny little fish, really. And that's actually where I think social media can actually be quite good. Like if I say I PR in the gym or I take photos or whatever, I go on my social media, I see actual strong people doing stuff. I see people with like a lot of muscle doing things.
See a small woman, half your weight, doing double the weight you're lifting.
Yeah, and it's not
warming up with your max.
It doesn't anger me, but like, you know, it helps you just keep perspective on these things. Like, all right, yeah, I PR, that was, you know, I'm really happy about that. But you know, I'm no big shot on the world scale. Like, there's no need to get out of my box yet. You know.
Yeah. But the fact that you have that mentality to look at it in that way shows how much you've developed as well, or how all of us have developed. Because if we can look at social media in that way and be like, we are so minuscule, and be completely okay with that, that is fantastic. Because I think we have discussed this before, where if you've gotten in shape and you're in the best physical shape of your life, that is brilliant. But if you do nothing positive with that, it is all for nothing. You know, and we've not seen that. Like, we've not seen someone actually get in shape and then their life is ruined because of it. You know? But again, if you take that ego narcissist sort of path where you just think you're better than everyone, you belittle everyone, and you don't actually become a better human because of that, then you've missed the whole point completely. It's not just about improving your physical self for the sake of vanity or for the sake of, I don't know, just getting back at an ex or something. It's about using that physical to transform all areas of your life. And that is why we always talk about the physical being the vehicle, not just having a nice car.
Yeah. I think there's a lot people can take away from this. It might not be the longest, one of our longer episodes. Definitely one of the shorter ones, but I think this is probably for the best we keep it short, because we could talk about this all day long. But
yeah,
all people need to do is literally audit what's going on and do something about it. Like, list the people you spend most time with, list people you spend most energy with, list who you're interacting most with, put them in 2 columns. Who's raising you up, who's putting you down. Look at that putting you down list and have a conversation with them this week. That's a real challenge for you guys listening today. Really be objective, no holds barred with it, because that will guarantee you, will allow you to flourish in whatever aspect that's holding you back right now. Fantastic. In the meantime, this is the last episode before next week's rebrand, rebuild, relaunch announcement. So stay tuned for next week's press release. Got lots of exciting things to show you. And we're really, really excited to show you everything we've been working really, really hard on. So exciting times coming at RNT. RNT 2.0 is around the corner. The rebrand, rebuild, relaunch is being announced next week. So stay tuned and thanks for listening.